At the tram stop on Rua da Graça, just after 7:19 on a damp Tuesday in late October, the morning commute leaves a thin, ordinary gap. The Caris bus GPS export marks a 3-minute pause at the Miradouro da Senhora do Monte Lebe while the driver logs a radio check, but the onboard CCTV timecode later shows 4 silent minutes and 1 frame where a passenger never reappears. If the records insist on routine, who stepped into that gap and how did they hide the time? Subscribe if you like this investigations. Rain pushed in from the river in long, slanting lines, the kind Lisbon knows by smell before it arrives. Street stones on Rua dos Anjos darkened to a uniform graphite, and scooter tires hissed as they moved. Marta Oleksienko lived 3 flights up in a tiled building that had once been pale yellow and now carried the color of cured parchment. She had arrived in the city in late spring with a suitcase, an art school portfolio, and a plan that fit on 1 sheet of paper. Temporary contract at a boutique hostel near Intendente, Portuguese lessons at night, a residency application tied to marriage. Her competence showed in lists, checklists for utilities, for the NIF number, for the SNS registration at the Centro de Saúde dos Anjos. She scanned receipts and filed them by month. She set calendar reminders for rent, data top-ups, and buses that ran early in bad weather. Her vulnerability ran under all of it, a provisional status that turned ordinary rules into tightrope wire. A stamped paper could cancel months of work. A lost card could close a door. She met Youssef El Mansouri by the elevators at Mercado de Arroyos on a Friday, far brighter than this one. He was collecting a bag of coriander and mint for the small kebab counter where he cooked evenings. She was buying lemons and canned chickpeas. He offered directions to an ATM that did not charge extra for foreign cards. He had the easy Lisbon mask down to muscle memory, work jacket with reflective strips, meal prep tubs stacked by the till, delivery accounts on his phone with the statuses toggled to busy or free like traffic lights. He spoke a measured Portuguese and switched into English when he saw her hunt for words. He could be anywhere and belong. Behind a scooter with an insulated box under a shutter fixing a latch, at a service door with a clipboard. The mask worked because it favored boredom, a man with a job who solved small problems, wearing a vest that no one asked about. In June, he helped carry up a flat-packed wardrobe from a discount furniture place on Avenida Almirante Reis. In July, he translated the power bill that came misaddressed and guided her through the EDP app to fix it. In August, he showed her a basement storage room below the kebab counter that the owner rented to employees for personal boxes and extra clothes. He kept vinegar and bleach under the slop sink to cut the smell of fryer oil. The mop bucket wore a gray halo where the solution had dried too often. The room was white tile to the ceiling, easy to wash, easy to pass a health inspection. They married at the Conservatoria do Registro Civil de Lisboa, in a beige room that smelled faintly of paper and old glue. The clerk read from a script. 2 co-workers from the hostel signed as witnesses. A line formed behind them before they had stepped aside. The photos showed 2 people under fluorescent lights, hair damp from the humidity, the edges of the building's fire safety posters caught by mistake. After, they ate bifanas at a stand under the railway just past Santa Apollonia. The wind off the Tagus polished the day into something they would call a start. There were things Marta did not say out loud when she mapped her future. She used the right pronouns when speaking about herself, and the wrong ones on old papers in a folder that lived under a sweater in the wardrobe. Her ID cards would align in time. That was the plan. She had the clinical letter from a doctor in Kiev and a Portuguese referral to the endocrinology unit at Hospital de Santa Maria. She kept the letters together with a rubber band, as if touching made them tell a single story. She did not expect the story to be tested by anyone who knew her well enough to know her, because she believed knowledge traveled along care. The city took shape around rhythmic tasks. Marta woke before sunrise to clean bathrooms at the hostel, fitted earplugs against the nighttime crowd, and learned to move silently among bunk beds without startling anyone. Youssef cooked until late, then drifted between deliveries and short-term shifts at a meat wholesaler in Marvila, near Rua do Açúcar, where pallets came out cold and steaming under plastic wrap, marked with lot numbers and halal stamps. He liked the hours because early morning work made him feel vital. He wore the same safety vest there as he did anywhere else, A vest makes you invisible. It is a tactic and a technology. The system in their life was public transport and the ticket that counted taps. Marta's Viva Viagem card recorded every entry with a timestamp and a 3-letter stop code. She liked that it remembered. She felt a safety in small data that did not care about feelings. The card was green plastic with a hairline crack near one corner where it had been against a key. She taped it once and promised herself to replace it later. Pressure pooled around paperwork. The residency application was a ladder of forms, fees and proofs, lease copies, joint bank account, photos and domestic scenes that showed continuity. Everything had to match. When a name on a water bill printed wrong, she stood in a queue with a number on a paper ticket that jumped in tiny increments on a display she could not see from her seat. She sent Youssef a photo of the ticket and a shrug. He replied with a photo of a grill that needed cleaning and a joke about grease. The morning that begins this story had nothing special on its face. Marta's spreadsheet listed a shift, a language class, and a midday appointment at a clinic in Campo Martires de Patria. Her calendar event read, intake, Tiwaf, da. She carried a canvas bag with a folder of letters inside, rubber band intact. Rain made the tram rails shine, and the city's patterned sidewalks took on the anxiety of being slippery. In the basement under the kebab counter, a mop leaned in a corner, and the bleach was down to half a bottle. A contractor sticker with a municipal logo curled at the edges on Youssef's van. In small ways, the day had already chosen its surface. The binding happened quietly. They filed a joint declaration at the bank just off Largo do Intendente to show shared finances. The teller printed a page with small numbers and a name order set in stone. When Marta signed, she watched the loop of her first initial shake. She did not look up. She set the pen down, and in doing it, fixed a grid around herself that could not be undone without a fight. The month bent toward rain. Buses ran with windows fogged. In the hostel's laundry room, the dryer lint smelled of wet cotton and sea air. Commitments became a ledger that Marta could not put aside. She resigned the hostel's split shifts to take a steadier cleaning job at a clinic near Alvalade, the kind with plastic chairs, a numbered queue, and walls that amplified every cough. She printed a resignation letter in a font the manager liked, saved the PDF in a folder called Moves, and placed a copy in her bag to hand over. She did not want drama. She wanted documents that behaved. Youssef moved money like a person who had learned to expect it to leave. He kept balances low and cash on hand high. He paid small suppliers in notes at their insistence and showed transfer screenshots to those who preferred a trace. He was good at work that required presence, hands on a knife, a wrist on a griddle, a back under a box. He took a part-time morning shift at a butcher's depot on Rua do Açúcar, where invoices weighed more than paper. Pallets arrived with labels in Arabic and Portuguese, lot codes stamped in ink that bled if the boxes sweated. He learned the click of the lift gate and the squeak of pallet jacks over epoxy floors. Small anomalies began to pool and were explained away as weather or human error. The route sheet from his delivery app one Thursday showed a pause between Arroyos and Grasa that did not match traffic that early. He said he had double parked wrong and moved the van before a tow. The cashier receipt for a bottle of thick bleach purchased on a Sunday evening at a mini mercado along Rua Palmira timestamped the sale 2 minutes after the store's posted closing time. He said the owner knew him and left the till on. A series of butcher invoices in his messenger bag ended in odd numbers instead of round ones because, he said, a manager preferred gross weight to neat accounting. The explanations were plausible because they were boring. The mask of work favors boredom because boredom keeps questions small. Marta continued to build a path in public systems. She booked appointments through AIMA's crowded portal and clicked refresh until a slot appeared. She filed an address update at the Junta de Freguesia and stapled the stamped confirmation into her folder. She added Youssef to a supermarket loyalty card to make shopping look shared. She made the case the state demanded: present, stable, ordinary. Quiet flags touched her and slid off because the machine she fed did not watch the surface, only the dates and sequence. They crossed a border without leaving the city when they registered their union in records that future officials would read. The public bulletin at the Conservatoria posted their names for a week, a tradition that still had teeth in small places But here passed unnoticed. Paper made their tie. Paper would be used to end it. The primary system that seemed to keep them honest was public transport. Marta's Viva Viagem card recorded taps that sketched her days in green, line by line. She used the metro when weather let her walk between stations and the bus when a route ran her close to doors. On the day that would collapse the story, the card log showed a tap at the Intendente Metro just after 7, a transfer at Martim Moniz, and an exit near Grassa in time to make the clinic's morning clean. A camera above the turnstile caught the crown of her head and the canvas bag strap. The log read like a mantra: present, present, present. It looked like proof because machines are tidy. Youssef's movements sat in rougher data: delivery app pings, a depot sign-in sheet in a plastic sleeve by a turnstile, an old CCTV dome above a loading bay with a clock nobody had set since spring. A door controller at the Marvala depot registered his badge twice in 1 minute like a hand confused. He held the badge in his wallet and the wallet against the reader. He did not like systems that kept him waiting. He pressed buttons until they gave way. When Marta told him in plain words that her medical records would change to match her life, he nodded as if to a schedule. He asked whether it would change their status at AIMA, and she said it would not. She offered the rubber-banded folder for him to hold and then thought better and put it back in her bag. He cleaned the grill with a bottle labeled bleach and black marker and said he would be late that night. She touched his sleeve and asked if things were good. He smiled like a person who uses his face as a lid. They made a non-reversible step with a lease addendum co-signed at a property office above a locksmith near Largo do Intendente. The landlord wanted security. The paper promised it. Names multiplied across pages. The clerk at the desk ran each sheet through a printer that added a watermark when the toner caught. Marta held her copy in both hands all the way down the stairs. Youssef folded his twice and put it in his jacket. The red flags that day were quiet and came in threes. A butcher invoice printed with her surname in the comments line, as if to tag a delivery to her flat. Youssef said it was a joke by a clerk who liked to flirt. A mop head in the basement swapped for a new one, while the old one dried without the usual crescent of grime. He said the inspection was next week, and the owner was strict. A bus GPS log later showed the Miradoro lay-by pause stretched 1 minute longer than the radio check recorded by the dispatcher. The driver would say he cleaned his mirrors. None of it could make a person stop moving. The city rewards momentum. The day solved itself forward. At mid-afternoon, Marta clicked submit on a clinic intake form that asked ordinary questions and one that trembled under her cursor. She wrote what was true and felt the small lift that comes with aligning what you show and what you are. She set the time for a follow-up. Then she walked out into air that had cleared and paused to message Youssef. He left it on red. She boarded a bus because the walk uphill in wet shoes is an argument with gravity. The bus's interior camera filmed a row of damp jackets and a wrist that lifted, holding a canvas bag strap. It filmed the stop button pressed by an index finger next to a faint ink stain. It filmed a seat gone empty after a pause, and then the traffic starting again. Her non-reversible step sat behind her now in systems that had no eyes, and in a folder inside a bag that had eyes on it from the wrong person. The bus pulled away, the ledger adjusted by one line, and a pause lengthened by 1 minute that would not be noticed until someone compared machines to machines. Promises fail quietly first. The clinic near Campo Martires de Patria called to confirm that Marta would bring her prior records to the endocrinology intake. The call rolled to voicemail. The hostel manager sent a perfunctory email asking when to expect the key handover. The message bounced because her inbox had hit a storage limit. A friend from Portuguese class texted a photo of a grammar exercise with a question mark. The app showed a single gray tick. By evening, rain had stopped and left streets with a shine that doubled headlights. The kebab counter took on its usual cue. Students, a bus driver with a paper cup, a nurse in clogs. Youssef worked with his head down. He moved as if the world were viscosity and he could change its density with speed. The basement below him carried the day's history in its drains. The ghost of bleach, the olive oil tang that never fully leaves, the cold of tile that has given up heat to water too often. 2 logs finally disagreed loud enough to trip an alert. The Caris GPS file for route number 728 recorded a 3-minute stop at the Miradoro lay-by at 7:19, matching a dispatcher's radio check typed as 3 minutes flat. The interior CCTV export holding its own clock showed 4 full minutes between doors opening and doors closing, and in that interval, the camera caught Marta's canvas bag strap in a frame near the rear exit and then never again. A witness without a face does not count as a person leaving, not in court, but it counts for a search. The gap was 1 minute long, and it was enough to question a route sheet that had never mattered before. At the same time, the depot on Rua do Açúcar produced a door controller audit for a routine inventory spot check. The CSV showed Youssef's badge against the reader at 7:31 and again at 7:32 after a short denial. The internal camera for the loading bay, which still believed it was spring, showed a white panel van backing to a line painted on the floor at what the overlay claimed was 5:46. The clock was wrong by almost 2 hours, but the shape of the van matched the municipal sticker curling on Youssef's. When a forensic tech later matched the sticker's torn corner to a shadow on the video, it turned a wrong time into a right person. The cashier receipt from the mini mercado on Rua Palmyra showed a bottle of bleach and a pack of scouring sponges purchased just after the posted closing hour 2 days before. The receipt number came out of sequence by 1 compared to the Zed report for the drawer that night. The owner said the drawer ran long because of a friend's call. The owner also said Youssef was a good customer. Both could be true, and yet the numbers pulled against each other like 2 ropes tied to 1 ring. Marta's Viva Viagem log placed her at Intendente just after 7 and at Miradoro minutes later. Then the tap stopped. No exit at a downstream stop, no later transfer. The machine wrote a blank where people wanted a line. Her smartwatch steps log would have spoken, but it lay on her bedside table charging, the band still damp from the morning. The machines that could have argued for her had been left out of the conversation. The machine that did speak talked in a dialect that only showed absence. Leverage tightened like a cinch knot. Their residency rested on continuity, cohabitation, co-presence, ordinary utility use that carried their names together. A break without reason would read as fraud to a clerk trained to protect the ledger. Marta's folders contained the truth, but truth requires a mouth and time. Youssef understood a different schedule. He understood that a day shift security guard would not cross a line after a certain hour, that a municipal inspector would not return the same day, that meat depots turn their cameras away from break rooms and drains. He understood that bleach removes smell first, then color, and adds a question mark to time. PSP officers from the Esquadra near Intendente took the missing person report after midnight. The officer on the desk had a form printed in blocks and a pen that scratched. He asked for the last known location and wrote, "Bus route near Miradoro." He asked for known tensions. The friend from class, arriving with a phone and a charger, said there had been a dispute about paperwork. The officer wrote "domestic" in a margin and boxed it. He did not like whispers. He liked checkboxes. When officers visited the kebab counter the next day, Youssef was not there. A coworker said he had gone to the depot for an early shift, then to the market. The basement door had a padlock, the key hung upstairs on a nail. Inside, tile shone brighter than the day should allow. In the corner behind the slop sink, an ultraviolet lamp traced a smear that bleach had missed along a grout line. It glowed like a thin river estuary cutting through a map, bright and useless without context until a lab attached context. On a shelf, a stack of butcher invoices carried a signature that wobbled like a line written standing up. One invoice listed an off-cycle pick with a handwritten note, "Deliver Rua dos Anjos." Butchers do not deliver to private flats. They deliver to kitchens and counters and places with grease traps. The note bent the ordinary rule. At Santa Apollonia, a fixed CCTV camera captured a panel van at a time that could not be reconciled with Youssef's claimed schedule. The overlay clock drifted by amounts too large to pass unnoticed when compared to train departure boards. A detective did the work the city punishes with headaches, matching frames to trains, trains to seconds, seconds to the clock on a cashier's POS that sold a coffee to a conductor in the same frame. The method canceled drift. The van stayed put where the math said it was. By late afternoon, AIMA flagged the residency file for contact, Not yet for fraud, because the machine still prefers caution. The file could be moved to a different shelf with one signature. The friend from class sat on Marta's bed and looked at the smartwatch face that had not counted steps that day. The room smelled clean in the way that worries people who know how rooms should smell, lemon and something like swimming pools. The mop in the kitchen corner looked new. The bucket did not carry the gray halo. The bleach bottle in the cupboard was new and half empty. The constraint locked when PSP seized Youssef's van at the depot gate under administrative authority for an inspection related to a missing person. The lift gate's hydraulic fluid left a dot on the ground where the hose coupler wept. The van's wheel wells carried fine grit that did not match the depot's epoxy and did match the gravel line at a municipal service yard by the river. The van moved to a fenced lot under a camera that did keep correct time. The world that had given Youssef space to operate tightened to measured lanes and signed forms. The clock began to speak in hours instead of days. Space narrowed to controlled gates and weathers of authority. The van sat behind chain link at the PSP lot, wheels chalked, a tag looped to the mirror with the case number printed in block letters. Inside the Marvala depot, a manager pulled sign-in sheets from a binder and handed them over in the corridor while looking past the officers toward his production line. He did not want his mornings disturbed. The liftgate sensor logs were exported onto a thumb drive that had carried training videos the week before. Factory systems always carry yesterday in their shells. Policia Judiciaria took lead for the violent crimes angle, while PSP held the immediate ground. Ayama placed a soft hold on the residency file to prevent automated closure under non-cooperation. That hold was a line in a database that could save or trap a person depending on who wrote the next line. Jurisdictions rubbed along their seams. PJ wanted to move fast on search warrants tied to drains and cold rooms. PSP wanted clean custody of the van and a written chain for the key set. A prosecutor from the Ministerio Público signed off on additional searches under exigent circumstances after the ultraviolet smear in the basement photographed like a map. The system shifted its weight. It favored the people who could print forms and attach them to other forms without smudging. Youssef's mask began to fray at small points first. The municipal contractor sticker on his van granted him a posture at service yards, waving at guards, backing to lines, turning his hazards on as if protecting everyone else. The sticker was from an old temp job moving bins at a riverside lot, kept because it worked. He had kept the safety vest too. Vest and sticker together turned headshakes into nods and nods into unmanned gates. He did not have a badge for the yard on Avenida Infante Dom Enrique anymore, but the habit of belonging had its own momentum. The coercion machine ran on hours and documents. PJ analysts requested Caris route data for every run of the 728 that week and received CSV files whose column headings mattered more than the values for the first pass. The pause at the Miradoro lay-by was always 3 minutes on the sheet. The onboard CCTV always ran a minute long, a quirk of a clock that drifted, and a driver who favored precision in declarations. A back-office engineer confirmed the drift rate by comparing the footage to the light cycle on the junction up the hill. Machines disagree in patterns. The pattern made the gap repeatable. A person could learn it by writing enough. Marta's absence had no voice, so it got one. A friend from Portuguese class, Inez, walked to the esquadra with a notebook where she copied dates, receipt totals, and the exact names of forms that clerks and officers mentioned. She drew a rectangle for the bus and shaded the minute where the logs did not match. She wrote down times from the mini Mercado receipt and stapled a printout of the posted hours she pulled from a cached listing. She kept the battery of her phone high and carried a power bank in her coat. She set a recurring reminder to call the conservatoria to ask if any movement had hit the file. A person who is not allowed into certain rooms can still build the spine of a case on paper and hand it to the person who is allowed. The mechanism pressed around Youssef and made his choices smaller. The depot asked for his badge on entry and recorded the serial number in a log that would later be photographed against his hand to prove scale. The butcher invoices in his bag went to a PJ lab that weighed paper, measured cut edges against a dull blade, and found micro-splashes along one margin that told of a counter wiped fast. The drain in the basement slurped, and bleach tried to erase. Bleach changed questions more than answers. A forensic chemist pulled residue from the grout where the smear had glowed and wrote a statement that had no verbs stronger than indicate and support. Strong verbs are for court. The lab speaks differently. Jurisdiction friction added delay at the border layer. The airport interdiction unit had the van's plate and his passport number, but the flag sat soft until a prosecutor elevated it. The flag lifted after lunch, and an officer posted the confirmation in the case channel. Cases build their own social networks in back offices, threads of numbers and names that pull people back to screens on off hours. On the Tagus, the tide turned and took a worry smell with it. In the city, inspectors moved through tiles and drains. The flip from target to operator came from what Marta had left ready. The folder in her canvas bag did not survive the day, but its contents had shadows elsewhere. She had scanned letters and stored them in a cloud account under a file tree labeled by month. Inez had the login to pull them down after PJ asked for everything. The clinic intake form she submitted created a ticket in the hospital system with a stamp number and a timestamp. The train of her days existed across weak ties and sturdy systems. She had made a map by living a life in public, and now the map moved hands. The checkpoint formed when PJ asked Inez to participate in a controlled arrangement around the basement, not to bait, but to fix movement in time. Youssef had kept a second key to the padlock on his own ring. The owner of the kebab counter claimed not to have one. The plan was simple and dull. Convince the owner to ask Youssef to open for a routine inventory that would keep the business compliant for an inspector. Routine, in a city of inspections, is a force. The hour was set for the next morning before breakfast, when the drain field would tell truer stories and the noise of traffic would be low. A CID liaison from PJ would sit in a parked car with a camera focused on the basement door. The unit's shift changed just before dawn. Batteries were charged, and every time was written in words on a whiteboard inside a van with no markings at all. The night ended on a pivot. The prosecutor's order to intercept at airport and ferry terminals cleared to green in the shared system. A municipal service yard gate log exported as a PDF showed a plate read by an ANPR camera just after dawn 2 days prior, tagged as a delivery. The tag was wrong. The camera had been set to auto-classify any vehicle with hazards on as a delivery in its daily dashboard. The error was helpful because it made the presence conspicuous in review. The small mechanical things always moved first. The plan lived in a narrow window between opening shutters and the city's first full hour of traffic. The kebab counter would request Youssef to open the basement for a supposed health prep check, invoking a real upcoming inspection. The call would route through an officer beside the owner, placed on speaker as if the owner preferred not to hold the phone. No words would be used in court later. The log of the call would suffice for chain. A PJ car would be parked opposite, camera trained on the door and on the padlock handoff. A second car would sit on Rua dos Anjos in sight of the van if he chose to drive it. The code phrase to mark the start on the radio traffic would be the innocuous label printed at the bottom of the butcher invoices, a string that only meant something to the people watching the numbers roll. The evidence chain already held 3 links that mapped time to one person. The Caris interior CCTV frame with time code between 7:19 and 7:23 showed the canvas bag endpoint as absence. The Marvala door controller audit showed a badge denial followed by access at 7:31 and 7:32, inconsistent with any route that kept a person near Miradoro without a vehicle. The Mini Mercado receipt showed bleach bought 2 minutes after posted closing hours, with a register number 1 off from the Z report sequence, implying the drawer stayed live for a customer who did not like to wait. 2 more links aligned under review. An ANPR hit at the municipal service yard read his plate as entering just after dawn 2 days before the gap, and a yard CCTV camera recorded a white panel van under sodium lights backing to a station with a drain hose in the foreground. The camera overlay time drifted, but a simple trick corrected it. PJ matched silhouettes of shifts at the yard to sunrise tables that do not lie and to the yard's own gate counter, which had an internal clock that updated off the network every hour. Somewhere in a machine room, a small computer told the truth out of habit. The third new link arrived from the hospital IT desk. Marta's clinic intake at midday created a ticket, and the ticket generated an automated calendar reminder that pinged her email server just after 2. The server log showed the email delivered, then never opened. That was not news, but it was a small, anchored dot that tied her day to a time. It set a limit on how fast any plan by Youssef could have moved. The tightness of his window argued for preparation. Youssef slept little, so the timing landed at his most mechanical hour. Just after dawn, he walked to the counter with a ring of keys and his safety vest on out of habit. He wanted the day to read like work. He spoke to the owner outside of the basement door, and the owner pointed at the lock and at a printed sheet that described the inspection window. The PJ radio carried a phrase, and a camera clicked to confirm the angle. The key rose, the shackle turned, and the door opened to white tile that smelled like lemon and chlorine fighting for attention. The drain told its own story under light that did not show in dining rooms. A forensic tech in disposable covers carried a swab kit and a luminol sprayer with calibrated nozzles. The tech did not search, the tech documented. The grout along the back wall had the faint map-like fluorescence already seen and now recorded in situ with scale cards placed every half meter. The slop sink trap was bagged and tagged with a time and words. The mop head from the rubbish bin bore fibers that did not match the new mop in the corner. The bleach bottle still held liquid. Its cap was bagged separately because caps keep edges that matter. While the basement was measured, the van was approached in the PSP lot with a warrant widened to cover undercarriage, wheel wells, and cargo bay seams. The hydraulic liftgate had wept fluid. The stain had tracked dust that a lab could read like a climate diary. Fibers in the cargo bay, one blue synthetic consistent with a cheap canvas bag strap, were gathered on tape lifts and set under microscopes that do not get bored. A technician matched a tiny tear pattern on the municipal contractor sticker to the shadow seen on the Santa Apollonia frame, connection by negative space. The sting's extraction path was the short walk from the basement door to a waiting car. The pressure readouts ran in parallel. The PJ camera operator called out battery percentage every few minutes as if counting down. The advance team at the depot called in a shift change. If Youssef chose to run to the van, he would find it gone. If he chose to call a friend, the call would sit on a log where PJ could request it. He did not run. He signed an acknowledgement that officers had entered the basement for inspection tied to an ongoing investigation. His hand on the form trembled enough to deepen his loops. The form is a net where people catch themselves. When he agreed to accompany officers for questions, he did it like a person who thinks that talking quickly can outrun a door closing. He wore the vest to the car. He kept it on in the interview room. He requested water and left a cup on the table that a lab would clean and put aside with a reference number. Objects help because they do not change their minds after. The operation initiated when the PJ liaison keyed the phrase again, and the case channel lit with confirmation from the airport unit that the flag on departure gates had been tested and stood firm. The prosecutor stood in a corridor with a phone to his ear and nodded without smiling. Paper moved through printers like a low tide on a tile beach. The city's morning shifted from gray to pale. Inez stood on the sidewalk across from the counter with her notebook closed and her phone at 90%. Her notes listed times and unit names and the price of a 2-liter bottle of bleach. Arrests read thin on paper and heavy in air. PJ placed Youssef under detention on suspicion of a violent crime committed in the basement of the kebab counter and in the course of movement in a vehicle associated with municipal service yards. The wording was careful because precision preserves cases. At the same time, a search team moved through the panel van's cargo bay with tweezers and patience. They found traces that bleach had failed to flatten, protein residues in seams, fibers at tie-down points, a thread consistent with a cheap canvas strap caught in a screw head. The evidence did not tell stories. It aligned times and places until the space for other narratives closed. The central question took its shape and then its answer. Who used the minute long gap at the Miradoro lay-by and how did they hide the time? Youssef used the route he had learned by working near those streets, board at a stop one station early, stand by the rear exit, watch the driver who always logged a radio check as 3 minutes. He moved in the 4th minute that the CCTV clock kept and the dispatcher sheet ignored, stepping off with a person he knew, turning the buzz's blind angle into a tunnel. He used a vest and a voice worn by routine and the municipal sticker on a van to carry movement inside the city's tolerated chores. He bracketed his acts with clocks that lied by habit, an uncorrected camera at a loading bay, a yard CCTV overlay that drifted, a door controller that wrote denial and access like 2 beats of a metronome. He bought bleach at a till left open past closing, and when he cleaned, he aimed first at smell, then at color, and last at timing. The 1-minute hole in the logs was the mouth of his plan. Misset clocks and the posture of work were the camouflage laid over it. The law did not need drama. It needed a chain. The chain ran from the bus interior camera through the Miraduro pause to the depot badge reader, and then to the Mini Mercado receipt number, past the municipal yard ANPR hit, and into the van's cargo bay seam where dust changed color along a line. It landed in drains and grout and in a mop head whose fibers told a narrow story. It ended in a lab report where verbs remained gentle and conclusions nonetheless pointed. Ayama set Marta's file aside for a human review with a note that recognized her as a victim in an ongoing case. That note stayed soft enough to be reversed, but firm enough to stop automatic closure. The hospital closed her intake ticket with a reason code used for deceased or missing patients only when PJ communicated formally that the case had moved from missing to suspected homicide. The clinic clerk who had emailed about a key handover wrote a second email with a link to a support service and a line wishing quiet to everyone in the flat. Systems that cannot grieve can still mark the dead. Youssef's counsel argued that bleach belongs in kitchens and that slaughterhouse invoices follow odd numbering on closing days. He pointed out that camera overlays drift and that a bus frame does not show a person, only a strap. He claimed that a vest means nothing and a sticker less. He asked, on paper, for an alternative that could fit the facts. He did not offer one that could fit the minute at Miraduro, the badge denial and access, and the service yard hit in a single day without a van and a person moving with him. The prosecutor filed motions to hold him while further testing finished. The judge read the case number aloud, then signed what the paper asked. Ines walked out of the station at dusk with her notebook in her bag and the feeling that the city had tilted a degree. She texted 3 people who had been in class with her and wrote in simple words what the police had told her they could say. She washed her hands twice and stood by a window until the glass lost its reflection and showed only dark. She put Marta's smartwatch in a drawer with a clean cloth. Objects have to be put somewhere. That is what homes are for. The kebab counter reopened after an inspector signed off on the drain and the paint. Customers queued as before. The basement, when not in use, carried a smell that could be identified if a person had reason to remember it. The van sat under a camera with a working clock until the lab released it or it was seized to auction. The municipal yard adjusted its ANPR classification so that hazards on without a verified delivery scan no longer wrote the word delivery in the dashboard. The clerk at the Mini Mercado began to close the drawer at closing time even for friends. The bus driver on Route 728 kept logging the radio check as 3 minutes, but the back office corrected the onboard clock so that footage and sheets would match. In a city, fixable things get fixed where they are seen. Marta's family abroad received consular contact and a description of the evidence that could be shared. There were no graphic details on paper, but there were enough lines for grief to take a shape. A legal aid group helped Inez file statements that ensured the residency file would not be used against people who had only tried to live. The prosecutor's office prepared for a long case with clean chain. There would be no fast spectacle, only slow edges that held. Near Miraduro de Senora de Monte, the lay-by held buses again in thin morning light, brakes hissing, doors open for 3 minutes and then shut. The pause was still there, short as a breath. A camera above a bus aisle counted minutes that now matched sheets. The question that had broken the alibi was answered, and yet the bus still paused. The city carried on around a gap that no longer hid anything. The tiled basement stayed bright. The Tagus moved with its tide and forgot the voice of bleach by afternoon. The last image was a rain-dark street drying in a patch of sun, and the thin, ordinary gap where routine rests, now watched by machines tuned to the same second.